This story was sent to us by a viewer named Liam. In the winter of 2023, Liam, his wife Emily, and their 6-month-old son Noah moved into a secluded mid-century cabin deep within the snow-covered forests of Colorado. The cabin was beautiful, surrounded by towering pine trees and isolated from the rest of the world. For Liam, it was the perfect place to escape the noise of the city and raise his young family. Because the cabin was large and the master bedroom was on the opposite side of the house from the nursery, they set up an old-school analog baby monitor on Noah's nightstand. For the first 3 weeks, life in the Colorado woods was peaceful. The only sound on the baby monitor at night was the soft, rhythmic breathing of their baby, mixed with the low hum of static. But on the night of December 14th, the peace shattered.
It was exactly 3:12 a.m. The cabin was freezing, the wind outside howling through the pine trees. Liam woke up to a faint sound coming from the small white plastic speaker on his nightstand. He rubbed his eyes and sat up. Through the fuzzy white noise of the monitor, he heard a voice. It was a woman's voice, soft, sweet, and incredibly familiar. It was Emily. She was in the nursery, gently singing a lullaby to Noah to quiet him down. Liam smiled weakly, feeling a wave of relief. He reached out to turn over and go back to sleep. But as he shifted his weight, his hand brushed against something warm beneath the blankets. He froze. Liam slowly turned his head to the left. The moonlight was spilling through the window, illuminating the bed. There, lying right next to him, wrapped in the heavy winter quilt, was Emily. She was fast asleep, her breathing slow and deep. Every muscle in Liam's body locked up. The blood in his veins turned to absolute ice. If Emily was lying right next to him, fast asleep, then whose voice was coming through the baby monitor? He stared at the speaker on the nightstand. The voice continued to sing. The pitch, the tone, the slight rasp in the breath. It was a flawless, identical copy of Emily's voice. It was singing the exact lullaby she always sang to Noah when he was restless. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word," the monitor whispered. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Terrifying thoughts raced through his mind. Was there an intruder in the house? Had someone broken into the nursery? He carefully slipped out of bed, trying not to wake his wife. He grabbed a heavy metal flashlight from the dresser, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. As he stepped out into the dark, freezing hallway, the singing stopped. The baby monitor went dead quiet. Then a sharp, wet clicking sound came through the speaker. Click, click, click. It sounded like a massive insect snapping its mandibles right next to the microphone. Liam sprinted down the long corridor, his bare feet sliding against the cold wooden floorboards. He burst into the nursery, throwing the door open and swinging his flashlight around the room. "Get away from him!" Liam shouted. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness. The room was empty. Noah was lying safely in his crib, sleeping peacefully. The window was locked from the inside. There was no one there. Liam let out a ragged breath, collapsing against the wooden frame of the crib. He checked the baby monitor on the nightstand. It was plugged in, the little green light glowing steadily. He convinced himself it was a radio interference. Analog monitors were notorious for picking up stray frequencies from truck drivers or neighbors. Even though the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, it was the only logical explanation that kept him from losing his mind. He went back to bed, but he didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. The next day, Liam didn't tell Emily. He didn't want to scare her. But as the sun began to set behind the Colorado mountains, throwing long, distorted shadows across the snow, a heavy sense of dread settled over the cabin. Around 5 p.m., while Emily was cooking dinner in the kitchen, Liam went out to the porch to stack some firewood. The air was brutally cold. As he bent down to grab a log, he noticed a line of footprints in the fresh snow just outside the porch railing. He walked over to inspect them. They weren't human footprints. They looked like deep, elongated human hands, but the fingers were far too long and the palms were narrow and twisted. The tracks came out from the dense tree line, walked directly up to the cabin's porch, circled the perimeter of Noah's nursery window, and then dragged back into the dark woods. Liam stared into the tree line. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no wind,
just endless rows of black pine trees. And then, from the thick darkness of the trees, a voice called out to him. "Liam, can you come here for a second? I dropped my keys." Liam gasped, dropping the firewood. The voice came from deep within the woods. It was Emily's voice, but Liam could hear the clanking of pots and pans coming from inside the kitchen right behind him. The real Emily was inside, making dinner. The entity in the woods was trying to lure him out. "Who's out there?" Liam screamed into the forest, gripping his axe. The response was a terrifying, unnatural distortion. The voice started to glitch, repeating the phrase over and over, speeding up until it didn't sound human anymore. "Liam, Liam, Liam, come here. Keys, keys, keys." Then it melted into a deep guttural hiss that echoed through the valley. Liam ran inside, locking the heavy wooden door with 3 separate deadbolts. He pulled the thick curtains shut over every window. He finally told Emily everything. She wanted to leave immediately, but a massive blizzard had just hit the mountain, blocking the main road with 4 feet of snow. They were trapped. That night, they moved Noah's crib into their master bedroom. They locked the bedroom door. Liam sat on the edge of the bed, holding his hunting shotgun across his lap, his eyes fixed on the locked door. They left the baby monitor plugged in on the floor just to hear if anything entered the rest of the house. At 2:45 a.m., the blizzard outside reached a roaring peak. The wind screamed against the cabin walls. Suddenly, the baby monitor on the floor crackled to life. Static, loud, heavy static. And then, through the static, they heard the front door of the cabin violently splinter and smash open. Heavy, wet footsteps began to walk across the living room floorboards. Thud, thud, thud. But the entity wasn't hiding anymore. As it walked down the hallway toward their bedroom, the baby monitor picked up its voice. The thing was practicing. It was shifting between different voices it had stolen. First a little boy, then an old man, then Liam's own voice. "Open the door!" the monitor screeched in Liam's exact voice. Then the footsteps stopped right outside their locked bedroom door. The doorknob began to rattle violently. Metal ground against metal as something incredibly heavy threw its weight against the wood.
Emily covered her mouth, crying silently, holding Noah tight against her chest. Liam raised his shotgun, aiming it directly up the center of the door. Crack! The wooden door began to split, but right before the door gave way, the rattling stopped. Silence filled the room. Then a faint sound came from the baby monitor on the floor. It wasn't static. It was the sound of a baby crying. Noah's cry. Liam looked down at the crib in their room. Noah was awake, but he wasn't crying. He was staring at the door in absolute silence. The mimicry was coming from the monitor. The thing outside the door opened its mouth, and through the plastic speaker on the floor, it whispered in a perfect imitation of their 6-month-old son. "Daddy, let me in. It's cold out here."
The bedroom door groaned under the immense weight pressed against it. Through the plastic speaker of the baby monitor on the floor, the perfect imitation of Noah's 6-month-old voice kept repeating, "Daddy, let me in. It's cold out here." Liam's finger trembled on the trigger of his shotgun. Beside him, Emily was hyperventilating, pressing her hands over the real Noah's ears so he wouldn't make a sound. Suddenly, the horrific scratching and pressure against the door stopped. The heavy, wet footsteps began to recede, dragging back down the hallway toward the shattered front entrance of the cabin. Liam didn't lower his gun. He stood perfectly still, listening. Over the roaring sound of the Colorado blizzard outside, he could hear the entity moving around the perimeter of the house, its elongated limbs crunching through the deep snow. Then the baby monitor crackled again. This time, the sound didn't come from inside the house. The speaker picked up a distant, frantic voice shouting through the storm outside the master bedroom window. "Liam, Emily, open the window. It's Deputy Miller from the county sheriff's office. Your neighbor reported a distress signal before the towers went down. Open up." Emily's eyes widened. "Liam, it's the police," she whispered, a ray of hope breaking through her terror. She began to step toward the heavily curtained window. "Emily, wait," Liam hissed, grabbing her arm. "Think about it.
How could a deputy get through 4 feet of unplatted snow in a blizzard, alone? Before Emily could answer, the voice outside the window called out again. But there was something wrong with the timing. The deputy's voice was perfectly clear, yet the sound of the wind was muffled through the glass. And then the phrase repeated, with the exact same breath, the exact same panic, like a looping audio file. "Liam, Emily, open the window! It's Deputy Miller!" Standing in the snow, barely 5 feet from the glass, was a creature that made Liam's stomach turn. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its emaciated, ash-gray body completely naked against the freezing cold. Its arms were unnaturally long, its fingers ending in jagged, bone-like claws. But the most terrifying part was its face. It had no features, just tight, smooth, gray skin stretched over a skull. But in the middle of its throat, a massive vertical slit was pulsing and vibrating violently, generating the perfect imitation of the deputy's voice. The thing wasn't looking at Liam. It didn't have eyes. It was listening. Suddenly, the real Noah, startled by a sudden clap of thunder from the storm, let out a sharp, loud cry from the bed. The moment the sound cut through the room, the creature outside froze. The pulsing slit in its throat snapped shut. In a fraction of a second, it turned its head directly toward the window pane. Smash! A heavy gray arm crashed through the glass. Shards of freezing metal and wood flew into the room. Cold wind and snow blasted inside, extinguishing the room's warmth instantly. The creature's long, multi-jointed fingers clawed blindly through the broken window, trying to reach the bed where Emily and Noah were trapped. Liam didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, raised the shotgun, and fired directly at the arm.
Boom! The blast roared inside the enclosed room. The buckshot hit the creature's arm, tearing through the gray flesh. The entity let out a sound that didn't belong to any animal on Earth, a deafening, multi-layered screech of 100 human voices screaming in agony simultaneously. It ripped its wounded arm back out of the window, stumbling into the snow. "We have to go, now!" Liam screamed over the roaring wind. He knew the shotgun wouldn't kill it. It had only angered the beast. The front door was smashed open, but their truck keys were in the kitchen. Holding Noah tight, Emily followed Liam as they ran out of the bedroom, stepping into the dark corridor. The cabin was freezing, snow drifting into the living room from the broken front door. Liam kept his flashlight trained on the shadows. They reached the kitchen. Liam frantically swept his hand across the counter, his fingers finally wrapping around the cold metal of his truck keys. But as he grabbed them, the baby monitor speaker, which Emily was still clutching in her pocket, burst into static. "Liam!" a voice whispered from the dark living room right behind them. It was Liam's own voice, but it sounded distorted like a corrupted vinyl record.
Liam turned his flashlight toward the front door. Standing in the entrance, framed by the white snow of the blizzard, was the creature. It had crawled back inside. Its wounded arm hung limply by its side, but its vertical throat slit was wide open, vibrating with Liam's voice. "Why are you running from yourself, Liam? Stay in the woods." The creature lunged forward, skittering across the floorboards on 3 limbs with terrifying speed. Liam pushed Emily toward the back door of the kitchen. "Run to the truck," he roared. He turned around, aimed the shotgun at the creature's torso, and fired his second barrel. Boom! The blast hit the creature dead center, throwing its massive body backward into the living room furniture. Liam didn't wait to see if it would get up. He dropped the empty gun, spun around, and dove out the back door into the raging storm. The snow was blinding. Liam scrambled into the driver's seat of his heavy-duty 4x4 pickup truck just as Emily slammed the passenger door shut. His hands shook violently as he shoved the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine cranked, once, twice, then, with a loud roar, it came to life.
Liam slammed the truck into reverse, stepping on the gas. The heavy tires spun in the deep snow, catching traction just as a heavy, gray face slammed against the driver's side window. The creature was right there, its featureless head pressing against the glass, its throat slit vibrating violently as it let out a deafening human scream. Crack! The window began to spiderweb.
Liam shifted into drive, floored the accelerator, and the truck plowed forward, smashing through the wooden perimeter fence and tearing down the unplowed mountain road. The 4x4 struggled against the snow, but Liam didn't look back. He drove through the blizzard for 2 hours until they finally reached the main highway and saw the flashing lights of a state trooper. They never returned to that cabin. They left all their belongings behind. The police found the cabin completely trashed, but no sign of an intruder. It has been 6 months since that night. Liam and his family relocated to a crowded suburb in Phoenix, Arizona, thousands of miles away from the Colorado woods. They thought they were safe. They thought the entity was bound to the forest. Until last night. Liam was sitting in the living room around 2 a.m. working on his laptop. The house was quiet. Emily and Noah were asleep upstairs. Suddenly, his phone, which was charging on the coffee table, buzzed. An alert from his modern digital baby monitor app popped up on the screen. Audio detected in Noah's room. Liam opened the app, placing the phone to his ear. Through the digital static of the speaker, he heard the soft, rhythmic breathing of his son. And then, from the corner of the dark baby room upstairs, a voice whispered right into the microphone. It was a perfect, identical copy of Liam's own voice, whispering a sweet lullaby. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word.